Welcome, everyone. We are excited you are here at our Watch Me Work session today. We are going to be talking through our creating a new budget cycle. So, as you get ready to either do a mid year reforecast or a brand new next year's budget, we will walk through all of those steps today together. So, I have on our call Nika Lane, who is one of our most amazing implementation consultants here. And so she will be here to talk with me back and forth as well as to answer any of your questions. My name is Melissa Ravelis, and I am our manager of learning and development. And I am excited to be here with you all. Before we jump too far forward, though, let's talk a little bit about our housekeeping. So you will want to use On24's chat feature to interact with us. We love to see those chats come in, and we are always excited to answer those questions or see as you are seeing something you like, or maybe we've answered a question you've always wondered. We'd love to see that in the chat, or sometimes I just ask random questions. And so go ahead and respond to us in the chat, say hi, shout out, and let us know how it's going. But if you have actual questions, if you could throw those in the Q&A for us, that would be greatly appreciated, as that is where we have our ability to organize those, make sure we're actually responding and you don't lose the answer. So definitely throw those in the Q&A. Nika will be there answering and assisting with those as well. We do have a diverse group of Martus users, so a couple of the things you see on my screen may not be available to you at the level of subscription you have, or at this level of, if you are not an admin user, you may have a different screen as well. And then we will send out the video and PowerPoint to this, so if you missed something during our session today and you want to catch back up, feel free to look for that email. It should come out tomorrow or Thursday with the recording and the there's not really a PowerPoint, but both recordings will be there, both the morning and the afternoon. By the nature of our Watch Me Works and what questions we have and things like that, sometimes they're a little bit different. So we choose to post both the AM and the PM there. All right. So let's see where we are headed today. So we are going to review the planner setup area. That is always a great place to start when we're starting a new budget. It's really the only place to start. Once we've reviewed the planner setup area, we're going to create a budget. Then we're going to look at our worksheet setup, because I think there's oftentimes a lot of questions about what needs to happen there and why. And then we're going to talk a little bit about our budget lines page. You may be thinking, well, Melissa, I don't see actual worksheets on this agenda, and you don't. And that's because we cover worksheets and how to actually make changes to that in our very last session of Watch Me Work this month. So towards the end of June, I think it's on the 23rd, maybe, we'll have it on our last slide. We'll tell you exactly. But that's when our end user session is, and that's where we talk more about our worksheets. All right. So, all right, we have a couple people. Yeah. Okay, perfect. So just keeping an eye on the notes, making sure everybody's with us. All righty. So with that said, what we are going to do now is we are going to jump right into Martus. So I'm going to share my screen here in just a moment, and we will jump right in. All right. So here is Martus, and I would love to know, I know that in the attendee chat, we're having some questions about some people maybe not being able to hear us, but I would love to know, if you want to throw that to the attendee chat, how many of you, what year of budgeting you are in Martus? So if this is the first year you're budgeting, you would say one or a first, and so on and so forth if you've been around in Martus for a while. If you're just now implementing and you are not even in your budget cycle, just let us know that too. I'd love to know kind of who we have on here and how familiar you are with the budgeting process. All right, we've got a lot of first year. Oh, I see 1 second, 1/3. All right, well done, guys. Thank you for the feedback. I appreciate that. So we've got most of our people here are probably in the first 3 years so far is all I've seen. So one of the things to know about Martus is that it's one of those softwares where a lot of times the buttons you push, you're only pushing once a year. And so that's why we'd like to do these Watch Me Works, just so you can kind of see. The other thing about Martus is Ooh, we've got somebody at a 5th year. That's awesome. I think I saw 2 of those. Um, that's longer than I've been at Martus, so well done. And one of the things about Martus, though, is because we only do it once a year. That's one of the reasons why we like to do these Watch Me Works, because not only do you do it once a year, but we change Martus on a consistent basis. So chances are some of the buttons may have moved. We may have added enhancements and abilities. And so we want to make sure that you know what you're doing. The other thing you can do, so if you kind of go through this today and you're like, I still have questions about setting up my budget and it's time for me to set up my budget, do not worry. We greatly appreciate you being here. And hopefully we can answer a lot of your questions. But if you want to meet with one of our implementation consultants, just send in a support ticket if you're one of our direct customers. Now, if you're working with a partner, you can reach out to them. But if you're one of our direct customers, just reach out to our support desk and you can set up your budget refreshers. So we're always willing to do this step as well as what we're going to talk about next week, which is in personnel. All right. So we are going to start here in the planner section. So in the left-hand menu, the planner section, this is where we plan for next year. So this is where we are going to start our planner journey. And we are going to come down to planner setup. Now, while you can give non-admin users access to planner setup, when you do so, they will not have access to all of the tabs except for worksheet management. So when you give a non-admin user access, they can only see worksheet management. They cannot see anything else. However, for most of our clients, only admins are here in this section. So what we're going to do here is we are going to click on for our next year's budget. Okay, so we're going to first make sure that our budget year is set correctly. So I'm going to pretend like we are making a budget for 2027. And so what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that our budget year here is set to 2027 or our next fiscal year. So if you're starting your fiscal year, maybe in sometime between now and January, or you're even doing a mid-year reforecast, whatever year you want to create that budget in and start working on, that's the year you want to set here. And you want to set the ending year. So if your budget year crosses calendar years, you want to set the ending year. So I'm going to go ahead and set 2027 as my default budget year. And now I'm ready to come over to my budget management and create my budget. All right. So from the screen, I can create a budget, and I'm going to do that by clicking on the green Create Budget button. And from here, I am going to put in my name for my budget, and we'll call this our working budget. All right. Now you can call it whatever you want. Martus doesn't really care. It just has to be unique from all the other names. So we're going to call this working budget too, because I already have a working budget. Now we're going to have the 3 options here for copy budget and load actuals and empty. So copy budget is going to allow you to copy the budget, any budget from any fiscal year. Copy budget and load actuals is going to allow you to copy the budget and use that budget as the basis for what worksheets are created, what owners and approvers you have, and your special purpose worksheets that may be included, but then also load actuals, either the current year or 12-month trailing, and doing various other options. Correct. So if I have, somebody just asked about doing a forecast for the year end of 2026, and they asked if that's where they should set their budget, their set budget year. So yes, you would want to set that to 2026 if you're doing a mid-year budget. And I'll show you which buttons you would push here on the Create Budget screen as well if you're trying to do a mid-year budget, because I'm sure multiple of you are looking at that as well. So in our method here, this is where we choose what to do. Now, if you're doing a mid-year reforecast, you always want to choose copy budget and load actuals. If you're doing your next year's budget, you kind of have the option to choose either one, depending on what you want in your lines once you start your budgeting process. So I'm going to go ahead and use copy budget and load actuals. All right. Now I'm going to choose my year that I'm going to copy from. So I'm going to copy from 2026 because I'm moving into 2027. And from here, we are going to choose our budget. that we want to copy from. So I'm going to use my dashboard budget here, and we're going to load actuals. We're going to load our 2026 actuals. Now, if you were doing a mid-year reforecast and you loaded your mid-year actuals, you would be essentially creating what we call a frozen budget, where you have actuals loaded in through the current month. And Nika, I know you're fielding some questions and doing some stuff, but I'm going to ask you this little pop quiz here. Where is this February 26th number coming from? Why is the system choosing February 26th there?
Of course. I love when you ask me questions I know the answer to. Ultimately, just like your default ending date dictates the month that your actuals are going to show in your dashboard financials, this also will dictate, and it will pull your actuals through whatever your default ending date is set to in your Martus instance. So keep that in mind if you want that to be a date other than your default ending date. You can temporarily change that default ending date to auto-populate it in the screen.
Exactly. So this is controlled, just like Nika said, from our ending date. So that is controlled here in the setup calendar. And that's where I would be able to change that. So whenever I'm with a client and they're like, oh, that's really old, we would look in here and make sure that we are setting our default month as appropriate. Now, another kind of side quest here that I want to talk about is if you have not chosen to start using the auto set option here, I do want to point that out because this is a big enhancement that I think a lot of our customers have missed. So that you can now have this auto set for you. So this really makes the Martus, especially if you have an API integration, kind of set it and forget it so that your users who are coming in here, hopefully every month, can still come in and see more recent data. So I really like the prior month option. What this means is if I set it like this, we are currently on June 2nd as we record this, and for those of you watching live. And so that means that in 13 days on June 15th, Martus is going to automatically set my default ending month to May, okay? And we don't have to worry about setting it. Now, I could also have it set to the current calendar month on the 15th. And if I did that on June 15th, Martus would set the ending date to June. So I would highly recommend, if you haven't started using this, as long as you don't have really old, or not really old, really long closing periods in your financial system where maybe you're like, ooh, I don't really want my users seeing data, the previous months until I've got it completely closed, all of those things. Then you may want to still do it manually. But if you have a little bit more fluidity in that process, or you just let your users know, hey, when you see the previous month, we may or may not have everything in. If you're missing something, let us know. And it's just about communicating what this month means. But if you're usually, we always close by the 11th of each month. We close the previous month, then you could definitely set this to 15 or 20 or whatever you need, and then Martus would automatically do that, which is awesome. This is my demo environment. We don't have real data in here, so that is why I keep mine set to back to February, but yours hopefully is a much more recent month than February because we are already in June. It's not even May anymore. All right, so back to our regularly scheduled programming here. We are going to, and somehow I've lost my create budget whole modal here, but that's okay. We're going to recreate this working budget 2, and we're going to copy budget and load actuals. And again, this is where you can copy your current year. So if I was trying to load actuals and make a reforecast, I could use my 2027. I'm going to create more of a next year's budget situation. So I'm going to load my actuals from 2026. Notice here in our advanced options, this is one of my favorite enhancements we've done in the last year or so. And it's to make all of this really obvious as to what you are doing. So in here, you can create worksheets for unbudgeted actuals. Nika, this one might be a little bit more tricky. Are you ready? How would I know what worksheets this is going to create here if I select this?
Ooh, I think I know the answer. I would duplicate my tab so I didn't lose my spot. And then I would go to my dashboard financials, and I would go to my, once we get there, worksheet comparison report. And what this does is it shows you have your actuals column and your year-to-date budget column, and any column where it says existing worksheet with that red X, that would indicate that in the current year dashboard default budget, there is not a worksheet for those respective red X's. So ultimately, if we checked off that box, it would create those 5.
Exactly. That's exactly what I was looking for, Nika. So gold stars to you. And yes, a lot of times people are asking, what in the world does that mean? And so that's what this means, is it means if we select that, because we've told Martus to pull in actuals. So now if there's unbudgeted lines, maybe in food service, where we used accounts that we hadn't budgeted for, those are going to be automatically updated. We don't have a choice about that. But here we have a choice on whether or not to make this worksheet. So this is a great report to keep an eye on. Oftentimes, I don't know about you, Nika, but oftentimes when I show new clients, this is we're trying to go through training, and I actually just did a budget refresher with somebody, and they saw this and they were like, oh, I have a lot of miscodings I need to go figure out. So a lot of times, because this is kind of at the higher organizational level, there's a lot of times what we call sheet dimensions here that should not exist together in your organization. So let's say maybe I don't have food service at Eastlake. So that means that all of these dollars here should not be here. They've all been miscoded. Sometimes it just means, hey, I opened a new location and I didn't budget for it. That's okay too. So depending on what this looks like, you may want to do some data cleanup before you actually create your budget so that those actuals are going into the right place. So this is a great report to kind of keep an eye on as admins, just to kind of make sure that everything is falling where you're expecting. All right, so we're not going to do that, create worksheets for unbudgeted actuals here. Notice that we can copy our worksheets, which we want to do. If we don't do that, we have nothing in our budget. It's essentially like creating an empty budget, but maybe we're creating our special purpose worksheets. Not sure about that. But we can include our budget lines. So if I unselect this, each worksheet is going to be blank. I hardly ever want that because then people have to go in and add those lines. But I can include or not include the line values. So I can have the lines be empty or the lines be filled out. I'm going to have them filled out because I will show you once we get over to the worksheet what it would look like if the lines were zeroed out. But this way I'm getting my line values and notes. I'm going to copy my owners and approvers. We're going to talk about that in just a minute. We're going to copy our targets and copy our SPWs and copy notes. So now I'm going to create our budget here. All right. And I'm going to click on this view task progress, which is always a good plan to make sure that things copied as expected. And you can see it's still thinking. Martus will often take longer when we're loading actuals in because it's doing a lot more work behind the scenes, because it's essentially copying budget and then loading those over. But you can see here, I got a success message. When I get an error message, that's when I know I need to try to figure out what's that error message telling me and fix it. If I can't figure it out quickly, though, I would normally send a ticket into your support team and let us, or if you're working with a partner, let them assist you with that. But we're all good. So now I'm going to come back and I'm going to come over to my planner setup once again, and I am going to set my new budget as my planner. I'm going to click on Set as Planner and hit OK. And hit OK again. Notice that it unlocked a bunch of worksheets for me because Martus knows that once I am setting a budget as my planner budget, I am expecting that users are going to come in and start doing the work of budgeting. And so to do that, the budget would need to be unlocked. So it unlocked all of our worksheets for us. Now, technically, I am ready to budget. My users could go in and start budgeting. There isn't any email or anything like that that goes out to my users. So I would want to let them know kind of through my own internal communication system to let them know, hey, it's time to budget. You can go in and start budgeting. But there's a lot more we can do from these screens right here. So let's talk a little bit about our budget actions. So one of the things that you will notice about Martus is a lot of times the action menu pops up once you select the budget. So I'm going to select the budget here. And I want to talk a little bit about this oh so tempting set as dashboard button here. Now, Nika, should I click on set as dashboard at this point here?
No, I would not.
Exactly. We don't want to set it as our dashboard budget. One, it's not going to do us any good in this situation because what the dashboard budget does is it becomes the budget that we are reporting here in the dashboard financials. Now, our dashboard financials are our budget to actual focused reports. And so you can see that here our ending date is 2/2026. While we could change this to February of 2027, we don't yet have any actuals for 2027. So there's no real reason, even though I have budgets here, like my planner budget, and as an admin, I can see those. But as an end user, I'm not going to be looking at my reports for 2027 until we actually have actuals starting to be loaded into those for 2027. And while 2027 will probably be here before we know it, we don't yet need to set our systems to be ready to start reporting for 2027. The other reason I don't need to set my dashboard default is because that really tells Martus and you that we are done with our budgeting process and no further changes should be made to this budget. So we don't want to do that at this point because we are going to be editing this budget. The other thing about this is that once you set a budget as your dashboard default, you can't push data from your personnel section. So if you have one of our tiers that includes personnel budgeting and you're using that, once a budget is set as the dashboard default, you cannot push your personnel data into that budget because, again, we think that once the budget is set as the dashboard, you're done, it's board approved, it's ready to go, ready for prime time, and we shouldn't be making changes. So we leave that unselected. It feels kind of awkward for a lot of us, kind of unfinished, but that's because this budget technically is unfinished. We're still working on it, and so that's okay. All right, I'm going to select this again. We can load actuals in here. Somebody already asked me about this in the chat, which I thought was a great question. And they asked if we're making a next year's budget based on like 12-month trailing and we load actuals in, can we update that if like actuals have updated? And you can't update them in like my next year's budget. So if I try to load actuals here, it can only load actuals through 2026. And if I tried to do this, I would get an error because 2026 isn't a part of the 2027 year. So it should give me an error. Let's see. Yep. So notice that. But we can always update those actuals within the worksheet itself. So if our users are seeing things that are off, they can always update the lines as needed. And I'll show you how to do that as well. All right. So the other thing we have the ability to do here is archive. And Nika, I don't know about you, but I really love the archive button. What are your thoughts about archive?
I also love the archive button for multiple reasons. Probably the one that comes to the forefront of my mind is before I make changes that I'm not sure I want to keep, or maybe leadership asks to make changes and you're not sure if they're going to say, okay, never mind, we don't want to do that. If you make an archived version, you can always restore it and you don't have to unwind any changes you may have made after that point.
Exactly. And so it's kind of a backup. It's that save as on our computer where we save a copy or I don't know how old some of you are, but when I was in college, we still had the option we were in that weird college moment where you could send in the paper handwritten or typed and produced on a computer. And so that save button became my favorite. And we would often do save as to save various versions that we may need to revert to. Same thing here. When I archive the budget, it becomes a saved as version, or if you're using like a Google Docs where you can go back and look at your kind of reversions and restore them. That's the same thing here. So if I come over to my manage archived budgets, I can then re-archive, and you can see here, it's going to tell you the exact day that I archived this budget. So, and I did it at 4:29 and 7 seconds p.m., whatever universal time that is. And I gave it a name called This is Archive. And so this is a really nice way to restore and mark that and then get it back. And because we're going to talk about budget lines in a bit, and we Budget lines is a bulk updater, so it's more dangerous than deleting because, fun fact, if I just were to come in here and delete this budget, that's actually one of the least dangerous buttons in the world in Martus, not in the whole world maybe, but in Martus. Because if I delete the budget, it just comes over to my archived budgets. The only thing that I would actually be losing would be any attachments in that budget. So I would still have the full budget. I would have all the SPWs. I would have all the owners and approvers and their status. I just wouldn't have those um, those attachments that I may have added. All right. We can also view the activity log. If this is not something you are utilizing when you are trying to figure out who created this and why, this is a great button here. You can see if I select my budget and click on view activity log, you're going to see all the things that I have done already in this budget. Now, we as the support team will often use this to help people try to figure things out, all of that kind of stuff. All right, we have talked about budget management. We have talked about set budget year. We have talked about manage archived budget. If you export the budget from here, you're going to get 5 tabs. If we have time at the end, we'll talk a little bit more about export, but I want to make sure we have time to get to some of our other stuff. But if you have exported the budget in this format, you can then re-import the budget here on the import tab. And now we're going to come over to one of the tabs of mystery, I think, in Martus. I think this is a tab that's often forgotten about because when you land on the setup page, you land on the budget management, and oftentimes we are trained to just kind of read things from left to right here. And so we often just, our eyes don't even see that there is a worksheet management page. This is the one and only place that you can remove a worksheet from your budget. So no other place in Martus can you remove a worksheet from your budget. So if I were to select these worksheets, I could delete them. And this is really helpful for some of our organizations who maybe have grants or other projects that change from year to year that are one of their sheet dimensions. Sometimes also it's just, you know, hey, we've split this up into multiple departments, so we're not budgeting at that department anymore. So it just kind of depends on what you're looking for and trying to do. But we get that frequently asked question a lot in our support desk. How do I delete a worksheet? Or as Nika, you are now reviewing a lot of the Marty questions. I know that when I was doing that, I got a lot of those. We do review these questions that we all ask Marty here. And Nika, would you agree that a lot of times people will ask, how do I delete a worksheet here?
Yes.
It's definitely a frequently asked Marty question. So this is the answer. It's the answer he will give you too. But it's to come over to worksheet management and remove the worksheet. Now, we've recently, well, maybe not recently anymore, but you can now add a worksheet for more than one place. So you can add a worksheet from here on our planner setup place. We have this button, but Nika, where else do we see the add worksheet button if we are admin users?
If you go on the side to planner and then worksheets.
Yep, exactly. So let me go somewhere else so I don't mess up my worksheets. So on the worksheets page, we have more recently added the add worksheet here. So that's just something to be aware of, but deleting you can only do from here. Now there's a couple other things that you can do from here that if you're going to use these features of Martus, you definitely want to do from here. And the first is setting the target of the worksheet. Now targets are optional. They are also unimportant to how Martus behaves. And so what I mean by that is I can set the target to $600,000. And the budget owner for this worksheet can budget $1 million. They could budget $2 million. They could budget $0. They could budget negative $1 million. Martus does not care. It's going to allow them to submit and lock that worksheet. It's going to allow them to continue to budget at a deficit or greatly over. And we are going to report on that budget. And if you have a system where we either send the budget via API into your accounting system, or you export a file format that's going to import into your accounting system, either way, whatever's in that budget is going to be included. So all that to say, this is really just informational for kind of the budget admin team who's administrating the budgeting process to communicate to the budget owner approximately what they expect their budget worksheet to look like when all is said and done. Now, note that this is a gain loss target. So if your budget owners are not budgeting income, the gain loss target is probably going to be a negative number because they are just budgeting expenses. So just be aware of that. Again, this is completely optional. We have a lot of customers who don't even mess around with gain loss targets. But once you select one or more worksheets, you can set the target here, and you can either do a percentage increase based on a previous year's budget, or you can set it manually. So I could come in and set this to add $1 to both. Well, sure, why not? Or adjust those numbers any other way I want. So then I'm going to click on set target, and Martus has updated those numbers for me. All right. The next thing I'm going to be able to do here is add owners and approvers. Now, again, this is optional. And so I'm going to click on update owners and approvers, and I'm going to select the owner of, apparently LeBron James is in my system, and I'm going to click on assign replace owner. Now, Nika, when I do that, have I restricted use of these worksheets to anybody but LeBron in this case?
No. So owners and approvers are completely separate from actually setting up the correct user dimension restrictions on the actual user profile. So that is, it just helps with automation from a workflow standpoint from the automated emails, but it doesn't prohibit, or on the other side of, it does not give someone access to a specific worksheet either.
Exactly. So while we have LeBron James' name here, a lot of times we as humans see that and think, oh, now only LeBron can see it. No, just like you said, Nika, everybody can see it who has access to Youth Center at General or food service at General. Same thing with the approvers. There's really nothing magical that happens about this other than we enable an approval process. And again, that approval process is more for us as humans than Martus. Martus does not care what status the worksheet is in. It is going to treat all worksheets equally. We are an equal worksheet opportunity believer here in Martus. Every worksheet gets its own opportunity, regardless of whether it's over or below the target, regardless of whether who has approved or denied the worksheet. Every worksheet is treated equally. All right. So this is our internal process. But here we can assign owners and approvers. Now, if you are at the plus or higher level, you will also have the ability to set level approver levels. And again, this is just identifying the notification pathway. So if I set somebody as approval level 1, set LeBron just for fun, even though he's the owner too. You wouldn't normally do that, but that's okay. And then I could set here Amber as level 2. So let's take a look now at what we have. I'm going to close this. So you can see LeBron is number 1, Amber is number 2. And what that is telling me is that when the worksheet is submitted, this person here who's number 1 is going to get a text, or not a text message, excuse me, an email letting them know, hey, the worksheet is submitted. It's waiting on your approval. They will also see that on their welcome screen. And we'll walk through this process more in depth from a user perspective on our Martus Basics end user training at the end of the month. So once LeBron approves the worksheet, then Amber will get an email to let her know, hey, it's time for you to approve the worksheet, and all will be completed there. So this, again, it's a really nice way for you as a team, especially if you have a lot of worksheets, to know which ones you've reviewed, approved, denied, all those things. But again, Martus doesn't really care. So a lot of times we get tickets about how do I mass approve all the worksheets. You can do that via export import, but it doesn't really matter all that much other than it looks pretty on your screen. Because again, Martus is going to report on whatever's in that worksheet, regardless of whether or not the worksheet is approved or denied. All right, so once we have set our gain loss targets, if we're wanting those, once we have our owners and approvers, once we've got those, and I should be on our budget too, we would be ready to let our users know it's time to do the work of budgeting. All right. So, one of the things we can do once we do that is a lot of times I will get questions about, hey, my owners and approvers went in and did the work of budgeting. I took it to my approval council, advisory board, all the grand poobahs of the world, and they said that they are wanting these changes. We want to reduce travel costs by 15%. We want to decrease office supplies by 5%, all of those kinds of things. And how do I do that in Martus? What is the best way? And the best way to do that is to come in and copy the budget. So we're going to pretend that people have gone in and made changes to our budget. So now we're going to copy this budget, and I'm going to call this budget version 2. Okay. And I'm going to copy all the things with it, and I'm going to click on copy and hit OK. And then I'm going to click on my view task progress and make sure all is good. We're going to give it a minute to do its magic. There it goes. And now I'm going to come back into setup. Nope, sorry. I'm going to come back into planner setup. That's where I want to be. And we're just going to select the budget. So I'm going to copy my V2 and I'm going to set this as my planner. And the reason I'm copying this, because a lot of times people will say, well, can't I just create an archive? And you totally can. The bummer about just creating the archive is that you can't compare the two. So the method I'm about to do is allows you to compare the two. The archived is great if we feel like we might want to restore that at some point. We just want a point in time copy so we know where we were. I have a lot of organizations who will do a mid-year, as they're doing budgeting, they may archive their budget every day in case they want to go back to it at some point and review it. So now we've got our budget V2 set, and I'm going to come over to my budget lines, and I'm going to filter to my account for office supplies, and I'm going to click load. Now Martus is giving me all of my office supplies lines across all my worksheets. So you can see all of that. And I'm going to come into my actions, and I'm going to click on adjust amounts. And we're going to select all, and I'm going to decrease my values by 5%. So to do that, and this is one of those ones where I really love our blue question mark to tell us. So to decrease values by 30%, enter 70. So by that logic, I would enter 95 if I want to decrease by 5%. And I'm going to click apply. Okay. And now let's say our admin team has also looked at a specific department. Let's look at executive. And they've said, you know what, we're going to cut some of executive's budget as well. So I'm going to come in, I'm going to select all of the lines here. And maybe I want to select everything but personnel. So we could do that. We could select all. If we come over to line mode, and then we can unselect our salaries here. So I'm going to go into actions, and I'm going to adjust the amounts here. And let's say we're going to adjust by negative 10%. So I'm going to do 90% here and click apply. Now, what's cool about this is that now I can go over to my planner summary, and I can run my side-by-side budget and actuals comparison. And I can do my working budget 2, which is the one we created earlier, and my V2 budget, and I can click load. And now we can see where those changes were made and what percentages we're seeing there. All right. So a really, really cool way to adjust and see those differences. And I think I did it backwards. I think if we do it this way, no, we're still all over the place. So
would we want to filter to just the executive department?
Yeah, that might help.
To see.
Yes, because we're not. Let me find that. That's the problem. Thank you, Anika.
Of course.
Now I need to switch it back so that we're seeing the 10% that we are expecting. Yep. So we've got the 10% there. And then notice for office supplies, because we had already taken off 5%, we're seeing 14.5%. That's the 5% and then the 10% on top of that. So this really allows you to show your the people who have asked for those changes that those changes have actually been made. So if we just did that to the original budget, those, we would get the new numbers, but we wouldn't have an easy way to compare the new numbers to the old numbers. So that budget versioning can be really helpful. And I wouldn't do that for every little change I'm making, but I would do it if I'm about to go in and make some big changes. If I'm just going to make some little changes as they ask, hey, I want to take this off or this off, I might just go ahead and do that in the actual budget. But depending on what you're trying to do and where you want to have points where you can compare, this is a really great method for that. And Martus really doesn't care how many budgets you have in a year. So it's not like it's going to break Martus if you have 10 to 15 budgets. I know a lot of us kind of get overwhelmed by that, but realize you can always clean them up after the fact as well. All right. So we have a little bit of time left. So let's come back over to Planner Setup because I do want to talk about what it looks like to create a mid-year revised budget. So I'm going to go back to 2026 here because I'm going to create a budget for my 26 fiscal year. Now we have in this system, we are looking at our fiscal year for it's a calendar year, so yours may not. So you, again, want to choose whatever year your budget is ending in. And now I'm going to come back over to my budget management. We're not going to worry too much about all the chaos I have in here because we're going to create a new reforecast. So I'm going to click on create budget. And I'm going to call this, I'm going to start with Watch Me Work. I'm going to call it February Reforecast. Oops. So far, I'm going to spell it correctly. And we're going to do the copy budget and load actuals. I'm going to choose my current year, which is 2026, and my dashboard budget. And we're going to load 2026 actuals. So this is where it's going to say through February 2026. In my advanced options, I'm not going to do anything here. And I'm going to click on create budget. Now, this is one, when I do a mid-year reforecast, this is one if I want to really encapsulate and make sure I've caught everything that I've actually spent. This is one where I would not often want to click on the create worksheets for unbudgeted actuals, because otherwise I'm going to lose some of the money that I've already spent if it's in worksheets that don't exist in my budget, because Martus won't have anywhere to put it. So we're going to wait for this to complete. And now we're going to come back to our planner setup, and we're going to see that Martus is going to have done something that it hasn't done before, which is mark our budget as frozen. So I'm going to select this budget and set it as our planner. It's going to unlock everything for me. And now let's go look at it because I want to see what it means there by frozen. So I'm going to go over to worksheets. Because my budget year is 2026 and the February reforecast is set as my planner, that becomes my default. Now, for our non-admin users, this is the only budget they're going to see by default, unless you give them access to see non-default budgets and you set the budget to viewable. So they won't have all of these options in here. That's another nice thing about Martus. We as admins can handle as many budgets as you want to create. Your users, your non-admin users, are only ever going to see your planner budget and your dashboard budget. So you don't have to worry about them getting confused about what all of this is, because unless you've gone to extra steps to grant them access to these, they're not even going to know they exist. So Martus is really intentional about keeping that end user experience as simple as possible. So let's just go into our IT worksheet here because I want to show you what this reforecast looks like. So everything looks normal in our budget. You'll notice up here that we are frozen through February of 2026. And then in our office supplies line, I want you to see that we cannot change our January and February lines because those are actuals that we have loaded in and those are now frozen. So I also want to show you our newish adjustment type, which is really just for these reforecasted budgets that have actuals that are frozen. And what this is going to do is it's going to say my budget, I'm the budget owner and I can see I've spent relatively less than what I normally have. And so let's just say we want to spend $18,000. That's really kind of what we're expecting to spend this year. I can hit preview, and now Martus is going to take the 2,774, subtract that from the 18,000. Whatever's left, that what would be 15,300 something dollars, 200 something dollars, that is going to be split between the remaining 10 months. So this can be a really nice little way, especially as you get further into your fiscal year and maybe you're doing a reforecast just for the last 4, 5, 6 months. It's a really nice way for them to take an amount and say, hey, I want to end the year at this, and have Martus do the math to figure it out. And you can see I'm still budgeting more than what I've spent per month, and maybe I'm okay with that. I want to leave myself some wiggle room in that account. That's fine. I can do that. and then I can hit save. All right. So just a heads up, we are about to go and head back to our PowerPoint. But as I'm kind of closing out and telling you what's coming up, please feel free to throw in any more questions or comments. And after we kind of go through our ending here, if we have those questions, we'll hop right back over to Martus and answer those. So all that to say, if you still have questions, you will get it. And yes, we will send out the recording for this. Hopefully I will do that tomorrow. Thursday could be possible, and hopefully it's not Friday, but no promises. Every once in a while, our webinar system doesn't like to spit out the video for me in a realistic timeline. And so I think I've got it figured out, but every once in a while it gives me pause. So definitely we will have that out to you. We will send it to you from webinars@martussolutions.com. So make sure that that's a safe email address, and that will be sent to you sometime this week, hopefully tomorrow or Thursday. All right. So what's next? Next week, I am so excited about this, Nika. Did you know that next week we have our June 9th and 10th. We are going to be talking through personnel, but we are going to be talking through it in the new format. Did you know that?
I did not know that. That's exciting, though.
So definitely, if you have personnel in your Martus instance and you are using personnel, please, please, please come next week. Our dev team is working really hard to make sure that the changes they're about to make to personnel are in effect before that webinar. We are not changing the functionality of personnel budgeting in any way. All of the functions and features that you know and love are there, but we have moved them around. So we have definitely moved your cheese, if you understand that reference from the book. And so we want you to know where everything is. And so we will be walking through that in the new format. So definitely check that out. Please let us know at support. We've had a couple issues with the registration on that. So let us know in support if you're having trouble getting registered for the June 9th and 10th one. You can ask Marty for the upcoming webinars page if you need to get registered for that one. Then we have our personnel deep dive on June 16th and 17th, where we go even further into personnel and talk more about things like allocations and updating pay types and custom spreads and all of those kinds of fun things that you can do in personnel. Then here's a PSA for the Martus Basics for End Users. We do not communicate with your end users. So the welcome screen box with the upcoming webinars on it, and the emails, only you as admins can see that. So if you want your end users to come to that training, please invite them. Get the link to the page to set it up from the webinar and send that out to them so that they can register, because otherwise they will not know that that exists. But we do walk through all of the basics as a non-admin user would, to go from budgeting to some basic reporting and even some basic special purpose worksheets. All right. Well, everybody, thank you so much for joining us. I hope to see you next week as well. Do let us know, or your support team know, if you have any questions. We are here to help. And thank you so much, Nika, for being a great question answerer, both live and in the chat.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
All right, guys. Well, we will see you next week, and looking forward to that.